Look at our agenda for today. First, I'll have our panelists introduce themselves here in just a moment. We have some questions that have been developed with you all and your interests in mind to ask the panelists. There'll be some closing remarks and then time for your questions at the end, and we will be wrapping up promptly at 1:30, so you can get on to whatever else is next for you in your day. So I'm going to give each of you about a minute to introduce yourselves. So we'll start at the end and then we'll work across the table. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, thanks.
If the green is on, the mic is on. You guys
Yes.
can hear me? Okay. I'm David DeBolt. I'm currently an editor at the East Bay Times and the San Jose Mercury News. I started that position as an editor just a few months ago. I'd been a reporter for about 12 years at daily newspapers and in Oakland, mostly here, Richmond, for the old Contra Costa Times, now known as the East Bay Times. I attended Contra Costa College. I was a student here from 2003 to 2006. Feels like a lifetime ago, and the campus looks very different today. But I was a journalism student here at Contra Costa College. I played baseball for the Comets. Moved on to SF State, graduated with the journalism degree, and started working right away in daily newspapers. That's me.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joel Mansour. I'm a breaking news reporter for the Metro team at San Francisco Chronicle. I'm also a Hearst Journalism Fellow in that 2-year program. I graduated from here in 2019 with my AA in journalism. And simultaneously, after leaving, here, I was able to get on at the Richmond Pulse, which is like a youth-based nonprofit newspaper here in Richmond. And I was able to work with them for about a year and a half while I was getting my undergraduate at SF State before graduating from there in 2021 and getting into the Hearst Fellowship. I'm glad to be back here. This department and this school did a lot for me. So if there's anything you guys need and any kind of questions you guys have about journalism, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you.
My name's Katie Lauer. I'm a little bit of an outsider from over here. I'm originally from Minnesota. I moved here in 2019. I'm currently a reporter over at the East Bay Times and San Jose Mercury News. We decided to bookend the Chronicle over here. I cover everything from Berkeley up to Richmond, everything in between, and then more as the newsroom needs. I studied journalism over at the University of Minnesota and graduated 2017. Kind of I think my perspective is just at different publications. I hopped around community newsrooms in Minnesota before coming over here, and then a nonprofit newsroom in San Jose. Did a year stint at an alt weekly. A year stint at an alt weekly in San Jose as well, and then freelanced. Did some time working with the documentary as well as just breaking news and features. And so I think if there's something that you don't think they might know, I might have a shot of having a little bit of a feedback issues. Different perspective. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that feedback. Cool. We've got IT in the back. They're working on this for us. James is back there for us. Okay. Thank you all again for being here. Appreciate you taking your time out of what is undoubtedly very busy schedules and slightly unpredictable. So we'll get to all that in a little bit. David, we're going to start with you if that's okay. Is it okay if I call you David? Okay. Can you tell us why you decided to work in the field of journalism?
Sure. Well, a couple things for me. Really couldn't do much else. I'm bad at math. Working, with my hands was not something I was going to be able to do. But telling stories is something I wanted to do, and I found at an early age was curious, like talking to people, like learning more about, who they are, where they're from, what they do. But this was something that I grew up with in my case. My father taught here at Contra Costa College for 40 years. I also coached basketball. So I grew up on this campus, and he was the advisor of the student newspaper here, the Advocate. So I grew up in the student newsroom, around student journalists, going back, I'm gonna date myself, late 80s or 90s, late 90s. So I got to kind of see what they did. And it just seems so exciting to me to be able to, go into work or go into the office and not know what I'm going to do that day. And really you get the chance to learn about all sorts of stuff. I've covered sports over the years, news, features, I've done some accountability stories. So that's sort of what led me into this career. I also had a mentor growing up who was the sports editor at my hometown paper and allowed me to get an internship. It was basically, I was free labor for a few summers, but that's what introduced me to a newsroom, and I found it to be such a magical place where people are yelling, there's police scanners going, the TVs are blaring, someone's rushing in their car to rush out to go cover something. A reporter 2 desks down is yelling at some politician about something. It just was a fun environment that I gravitated toward. And I've been doing it ever since.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Joelle, this next one is for you. Can you tell us what is the best and whoops, that's not the right slide. There we go. The best and most challenging part of your position?
I would say like the ability to have to, be able to pivot and go from one thing to the next. I think that's the most exciting part about what we do, but also the most like, it makes you have to think and have to work through the different scenarios of what you're going to have to face when you get to like, a shooting scene or something that's going on that you might not have all the information for, but you have to get there and kind of start piecing things together. So I think that for me, in covering breaking news, I feel like that's always the kind of like the two-edged sword of it's great, but it's also like it's a challenge. And it gives you like a chance to kind of try something fresh every day, build upon the previous day, what you've learned from your previous coverage. And you might, come into a situation where, you remember, I learned this a few weeks ago in covering this shooting scene. I can apply this to this shooting scene that I'm covering right now. So it's something that's great about this field, is that it gives you that opportunity to learn something new every day.
Great, thank you. Katie, this next one's for you. If there is a typical day, could you please describe it?
I think they touched on the fact that we don't really know what any day looks like. It's pretty well. I mean, this whole week has been, it's only Wednesday and I say it's a whole week. I think the thing that is fun is that it's unknown, but then you're always kind of trying to beat the beast of planning and always thinking forward and trying to just constantly think, thinking ahead of what do I need to do for this week? Do I have any long-term stories that I need to be working on? Doing some calls here and there. Is there a council meeting coming up? So like going through agendas, talking to folks. So rather than saying that anytime between 7 and 8 p.m., I might be thinking about a schedule. It's more about what can I do right now that'll help my whole week? Can I make a quick call before our editing meeting at 9 a.m. to make sure that the story I'm going to pitch is actually going to come together by 2 p.m. or 1 p.m. I think also being flexible. Berkeley had breaking news this past week, the UC strike on Monday, and then some turmoil allegations within the police department yesterday. So anything I had planned was out the window, kind of having to get a new start. Kind of can be daunting at times to know that you're going into something completely unprepared, but it's also kind of fun. You get a little bit of a dopamine rush. So it's lots of things. It's making calls. I'm trying to repeat myself, but I think that's what it is. You're making calls, you're making phone calls. And I think the biggest thing too is when you think about journalism, it's the actual written product at the end of the day. And so I think it's hard and it's a fun balance to try to weave in time to actually put words down on the paper. You can know what you're going to talk about and you can know the issues at hand, but also getting some time to just physically put words in order and in a way that makes sense and is digestible. So it's a lot, but I think if you're someone who likes to juggle lots of plates or balls or whatever that phrase is, and is always thinking and having curiosity, it's a fun day. It's a fun shift. Go by very quickly.
Yeah, I would imagine it goes very quickly. And I like what you said about it's less about focusing on what I need to accomplish in a day, but a week to make sure that you can get the things done and the words on the paper for the day or in the computer or wherever they go.
And you could plan and then things don't work out. So just like being flexible, I think is a big part of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. David, we're going to toss this one back to you. I'm back in order. I messed up the order of the questions. Sorry, panelists, if I threw you for a loop, but I think I'm back on track now.
You're flexible.
Yeah, okay, you're flexible. That's right. You're the best panel for this. Maybe I'll just throw all these slides in the air and we'll just put you to the test. David, what advice would you give anyone in this room or anyone else who wants to pursue a career in journalism?
I think first, read newspapers, read news outlets, read books. You know, the second thing I would say is, you know, writing is a craft. It's something that you develop over time and get better at over time. I didn't walk in the door here at Contra Costa College way back in the day with a lot of skills, but I developed them. And you know, if you take some time every day just to write something, you know, just 30 minutes, an hour, you know, just keep kind of chipping away at this craft. You'll find it'll get easier. You'll get better at it. You'll be quicker. Join the student newspaper here on the campus. It's a great place if you want to pursue a career in journalism, just to kind of get involved and sort of start to understand the business. What I always liked about student newsrooms was that you got to do a bit of everything. You know, you could take pictures, you were writing, you were editing. When there's a newspaper to be put out, you're paginating the newspaper and doing design. It'll open your mind up to lots of possibilities. And in the field of journalism, I think a lot of people think like the three of us here are writers or editors, but we have photographers, we have designers, we have copy editors who their job is just to read stories for tomorrow's paper. We have people that put the newspaper together physically, and it's what they call the daily miracle, trying to fit all that stuff into the paper every day and then do it again the next day. So that's some of my advice. I think, you know, reaching out and networking with like reporters and editors in your area, you know, is one way to sort of get your foot in the door. I think you'll find that journalists are generous, you know, in nature and are giving of their time. So I wouldn't be afraid if there's someone you read in the Chronicle or the East Bay Times or the Washington Post or the LA Times or wherever, reach out to them, you know, and you know, you might find that you could discover a mentor. Some advice.
Great. Oh, yep, back on. That's great. Thank you. And we also have our teacher and advisor for the Advocate, the school newspaper here. So if you have questions at the end, you can hop over to that side of the room and get some scoop on that. But I will say, just as a reader of the Advocate here, it's a legitimately awesome campus newspaper. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. It's also online. And also there's many ways, as David said, that you can join that. You don't have to just, you know, it's not just pen to paper. There's lots of other opportunities to get involved and learn really hands-on in a really professional way. So thanks for encouraging that too. That was great. Thank you. Katie, the next one is for you. Could you tell us about your educational and career pathway a little bit more, and any degrees, certifications that were required, and then anything extra you undertook?
Yeah, so I already mentioned it before, but at the University of Minnesota, I got kind of lucked out when I knew that I kind of wanted to do journalism, knowing similarly that bad at math, but liking people and words, it was a good path for me. So the program there was incredible. A lot of the local editors and reporters from the Twin Cities were professors or adjunct and would come in. I like to think that, I mean, I graduated in 3 years and I really shouldn't have. I was pushing out for some reason. So I was on the professional track, and they really emphasized that this is more, it's something that you learn. And like David said, you don't have the skills at start, but you have the curiosity, you have the interest and desire to put them together. I kind of picture it more as an apprenticeship than educational training. I mean, that's the same thing, but like it's hands-on knowing. It's like going to the newsrooms and seeing all of the editors talking back and forth and seeing the ways that photographers are going out and coming back and communicating. And it's just being able to be a sponge and absorb that was what I really enjoyed about the J School program I was in. And I think I might be a little different from these two, especially with the path that I took. I think something that struck out with me early on was, if you're interested in a certain beat or a certain topic, run with it until like that runway is no longer there. Because beyond knowing what you're doing and getting taught like how to write a lead, a nut graph, all that means. It's just doing it. And so the program that I was in was really good. Getting people in the student journal, the student program, or the student newspaper, excuse me, but then also practicums at local papers. So I was working at the St. Paul Pioneer Press for a little bit, kind of being bad, but professionally bad, if that makes sense. When it comes to certifications and trainings, I am trying to tap into that more because I think I've only heard good things from, if you want to do more accountability journalism, really getting into something that is that niche, or I don't know what the other ones are, health things, so you can learn how to navigate the different healthcare issues. I think there are so many niches in this industry that if you have something of interest, dive into it, and there will be a certification, there will be a program that teaches you those things. And also just like reading different publications. I think you can learn a lot. And that was something that my professors always told me was like, read the newspaper and everything, but also read your alt weekly. You get a different perspective of the ways that humor can be brought into a story, or a different angle to how you introduce a character, as well as magazines and everything. So I think what I learned was more of just like enveloping yourself in the newspaper industry, and like trying to just learn as much as you can, and love saying the words "I don't know." So yeah, I think that's where education.
Sounds like a lot of humility needs to be involved. Is
Oh, yeah. We know nothing.
Thank you so much. Joelle, the next one is for you. If you could do anything over on your journey to this point, what would it be and why?
I would ask more questions, like a lot more questions. I mean, you learn through, experience, and you learn how to interview people by interviewing people. My time here at Contra Costa, there was a couple of different stories that fell through that I wish I would have pushed for, to get, even if they weren't like breaking news, or if it wasn't something that was, pressing, I just felt like, let me get out there and get another story or something, another byline, which helps in the long term of things. But definitely asking more questions, and asking the question that maybe, one thing that we kind of learned was, maybe saving that uncomfortable question for the very end, when that you've asked all the questions that you needed to beforehand. And that was one thing that, like I think everybody's mentioned before, that you learn as you practice. And that's something that over the years since, coming here to Contra Costa College, it was something that really helped, helped in my development over the years. So like, yeah, getting that practice in, especially like here in this environment, it can really help you later down if this is something that you choose to do on a professional level.
Great advice. Thank you. David, this one's for you. What was something that surprised you about your journey to becoming an award-winning journalist?
Surprised me. This job's full of surprises on a daily basis. I guess I would say coming into this, as a young reporter, I had to develop thick skin. A lot of the work that we do, imagine like your homework gets put onto a website or in a paper every day. It's there for everybody to see. Can't screw up. If you screw up, you're going to hear about it, right? There's some of the stories we tell, it's high stakes. So there can be some pressure in this job, like most industries. On my personal journey too, I think that one of the things that surprised me too is just, I knew I wanted to tell stories, but taking in people's stories, can be taxing. A lot of times when we're going out to interview somebody, it's because something either really good happened to them or something really bad happened. And, this might be the worst day of their life. And we're there to ask them about it, talk to them about it, hope they will open up to us. That's something that I don't know if it ever gets easier over time, but something that, I've had to sort of deal with over the years. And it's toughened me. And I think that I don't know if I'm answering the second part of this about an award-winning journalist thing here, but it's some of the good stuff. I love my colleagues. I've worked in multiple newsrooms. It's fun to come to work. you know, and work was always something when I was coming up in college and grunting and working through college. Those weren't jobs I liked. Those weren't jobs I looked forward to going into in the, you know, in the morning or for the evening shift. But as I said, the newsroom is just a fun environment. And, you know, if you're working in journalism, you know, reporters have each other's backs. There's good support system, and you meet lifelong friends. So that's some other surprises. Late nights sometimes. If you're covering, like I used to have to cover the Oakland City Council meeting. I don't know if any of you have ever watched an Oakland City Council meeting before. They can go till 2 or 3 in the morning, or they're like, you know, 12 hours long. Some of what we do can, you know, be like watching paint dry, but it's a necessary, it's necessary to cover, you know, stories and to make sure that things don't go unnoticed. Right.
Great.
That's it.
Yeah, I did not know that about the Oakland City Council meetings. Thank you for
They're a
going. to them.
marathon. Yeah.
Thank you for reporting on them so that we don't have to be there for 12 hours. Katie, David talked a little bit about the importance of seeking out mentorship and, you know, not being afraid to cold call people to get a mentor. I'm just curious if you can share anything about your own personal experience, if you were mentored and how that helped you.
Yeah, actually, I think the first mentor that I can remember, this woman, she's about 5'3", always would walk into the classrooms carrying like just a stack of like loose leaf papers of what she was reading that day and everything. And I immediately knew that I was like, need to talk to her. And the biggest thing that she said that kind of put us on a track of mentorship was just, I was applying for a practicum at the time. And I think a lot of the times when you're young, you want to do the thing that'll set you up for success the most. And sometimes that can be different than what you should do. You know, I was thinking, wow, I should go into breaking news, the hard news internship. And she was someone who was able to say, hey, are those really like what you're passionate about? It's not that I'm not passionate about news, it's not what I'm getting at, but more it was like, there was an opportunity to do a slightly different internship at that level. And so she spoke in and like stepped in with saying like, hey, your strengths are going to be much different than someone else's. And I think trying to compare yourself is just going to like bury you even more, because if that's not what you want to do, it's going to show in that way. So Gigi was just always there for being whatever you're thinking and whatever your curiosities are, someone else is probably thinking that as well. So don't like negate any of your own thoughts or considerations. And also if it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea. But that's kind of where she was at. And then another thing that I think is really important is she taught me just the value of like always, like, I don't know about you guys, but I have a constant internal monologue. I don't know if it's the ADHD or if it's just the fact that I'm not scrolling Twitter, by the way. I have notes because I need to keep things in my head. But always constantly questioning things. So she would say, like, she would give us challenges of like, okay, if you're walking down the street in a big city, take a block, enjoy the scenery, walk. But then the next block, you know, question everything. Why is this tree here? Is that actually providing shade? Have I noticed that it's cooler here versus another place? Why are these people over here? So like someone who was just always in my corner of not only validating the things that I was nervous about pushing for, but also then challenging me to be like, okay, well, where do we go next? And I think she was someone who was really instrumental for me to be able to be where I'm at right now. But then I think any newsroom I've been in, minus one or two here and there, there's always the older reporters that are going to be there who know the ropes and know the people to talk to, the people who do not to talk to. And I think we've said it a million times now, just being humble and not knowing what you're doing, but then asking for help. Someone will know what to do or where to guide you next. So I think mentorship can be big in the way of the professor who's been there and award-winning and has clips out the wazoo, but also can just be your colleagues, both above you and your peers. So that's kind of like a really broad everything question answer, but I think you can find mentorship wherever you need it around this industry. So
are you still in touch with that teacher?
I am.
Oh, great. That's good
She
to
actually
know.
was funny because I had like told her, I was like, you know, I'm gonna go write in California one day. She's like, okay, let me know when that happens. And then, you know, these things happen.
There you are. Great. Thank you. Joelle, you ready? All right. So tough one. I think we've talked about this a lot already today, but the question is, what kind of work would a student completing the journalism program at CCC be prepared to do, especially given that you completed this program at CCC?
So like when I finished my work here in my AA, and I got that job here locally in the Richmond Pulse, it was an ability to be able to kind of like put into practice what I was already doing here on campus, but on a wider scale, like in a wider net. I was able to go, into my community because I live here, I grew up here in San Pablo, Sobrante, Richmond, and just kind of find stories. Was able to go talk about people that had interesting businesses that they were trying to get started. This was all like end of 2019, beginning of 2020. So a lot of pandemic coverage, a lot of telling stories from this side of the East Bay, which is something that not a lot of outlets around here are going to do. You have this school and this campus actually provides a lot of coverage for the local community here. So I felt like once I got done with my work here in terms of the advocate, and telling stories on campus, it gave me that confidence to just go out into my surrounding community, and have that I guess that practicum in me already, where I was able to go into a situation and talk to people and have those conversations with them, get to know them on a personal level. And some of those sources that I talked to in leaving this campus are still people that I tap in with on a regular basis. I got introduced to the Rise Center through this campus, so like I've been able to use them as a support for other coverage, and even to today, in reaching out for stories about youth in this area. They're definitely a source I go to all the time. So working here on this campus, granted it is it's a little small section of the East Bay, but there is a chance here for you to be able to go out and tell stories that nobody else can tell. And I think that that's what gave me the confidence in leaving here to build upon that, and then eventually build upon that. And I think that journalism is that sense of like trying to feel out how big the pool is, and I want to touch every corner of that pool. So, and granted, we're all human beings, and there's certain physical limitations we have, but that curiosity is something that in leaving here was kind of instilled in me, and to kind of like go forward with that. So I think that as a student here, you have those opportunities right at your fingertips to be able to practice this work of journalism in a very meaningful way.
Great, thank you. That leads really nicely to the next question for you, David, about advancement once working in the field, outside of working, on CCC's campus or potentially the next transfer institution, but full-time employment. What does advancement look like?
In the professional field?
Yes, please.
They're like, I guess I'm an example of this right now. I moved up to become an editor of the paper. What I found in newsrooms is, and I think it's still true in most places, that you'll cover a beat. Maybe you'll come on at the paper and you're covering a certain city, or you're covering crime and breaking news. Lots of reporters will do something for 3, 4, maybe 5 years, and you just get kind of bored with it, right? And just say, I'm gonna do something else. And the papers usually, or the organization's usually pretty good at saying, okay, let's find something else for you to do. You can continue to report, but report on different things. There's not, these days with consolidation at the paper too, there's more and more opportunity to cover a variety of different things and beats. But I think it's a career where, as I said, there's opportunity to do a number of things throughout your career. And that could include moving up to become an editor, which is what I'm doing now. In that case, I gave up my byline. You won't see my name in the East Bay Times or San Jose Mercury News, but I'm working with reporters and younger reporters in particular to just, try to impart the knowledge I have and the skills I have to, improve their work, improve the newspaper. And that's been fun. I don't know what's next for me. I don't know if there is advancement beyond this. I mean, I think I might have peaked at this position here if I get to stay here. But, I think I'll say this too. What I found in sort of growing up around the advocate and around student journalism, a number of the students went on to do things outside of journalism, but the skills they gain here, communication skills, writing skills, it's a confidence builder, really played a big part in what they ended up doing, whether they went into teaching, coaching, cook, the skills you gain even in student journalism, can be applied elsewhere.
Great, thank you. Joelle, I've got another one for you. This next question is about fast tracking. Is that a possibility, do you think? And if so, what's your advice?
I wouldn't say that there's the fast track, I feel like, in journalism, because you have to, like what we've been talking about, you have to go out and do it. And like, it's, like she mentioned, it's almost like an apprenticeship. There's a certain amount of hours and time that it takes to be able to, develop the craft of being able to put together a story. But I will say, like, some of the things that really helped me was just plugging into my teachers, my journalism department. Those were the sources that I had that gave me the opportunity to be able to look and see what was out there. When I got to SF State from here, I wasn't initially in the student paper over there, but I did what I could to get a job within the department. And, I was able, delivering mail, getting to know my teachers, on a personal level. And that in and of itself helped me be able to kind of pick their brain about what my next steps would be post graduating. And through them, I was able to kind of tap into the resources of different internships. I applied for a bunch of them, different scholarships. I applied for a bunch of them. Luckily, I was able to get into the Hearst Fellowship, which is something that was really like, I guess, a really competitive thing. I didn't realize when I applied for it how competitive it was, but I was really brought to earth about it with, from my teachers and whatnot. When they kind of pushed me to continue, they helped me with the interview process and all that stuff. So your teachers are a great resource in terms of getting ideas on what you're going to do for a job after you graduate. Even after leaving here, I was constantly in communication with Paul DeBolt. He was pretty much, in terms of mentorship, he was my mentor here. And even when leaving here, just talking to him and getting idea of what my strengths might be in terms of my writing. And so if you tap in with your advisors, your counselors, your teachers, I feel like they have that experience to kind of point you in the right direction, to take you to a place that will fit you and what you're able to do as a journalism, as a journalism student.
Great, thank you. The next section is your closing remarks, but I wanted to just ask that you consider including one thing in your closing remarks, because you've all talked about the fast-paced nature of your work, long nights. Joelle, before we started, you shared with me that you had lived in Houston and what a kind of change in social culture that was for you coming from the Bay Area. So I'm just wondering if you could each in your closing remarks, which can share any or elaborate on any tidbit you've already shared, if you could also include a little bit about how you find the balance in your life, especially when you're in a situation where maybe the news you're reporting on or required to report on is going against your own personal opinions or values, and sort of how you manage that. And then just what you're doing when you're not at work to not be at work and be present for your families or friends or wherever else, people in your lives. Thanks. Katie, do you want to go first or do you need a second?
I can go first.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to think of like what I don't know if we've missed anything. I just think that like when it comes to this job, people often ask me like what it means, and I kind of boil it down into a slightly too simple concept of like, it's like elementary school, you go on field trips and do book reports. And I think that having some of that brevity, is that the right word I want? Brevity, like lightness to the job kind of helps balance the hard. Like David said, talking with people on their worst days, or talking about issues that are going to change people's lives, or just very dull and dragging. You have to find the light, I think. And I think that's something we try to do in any story. But then personally, I don't know, throw in things that you want to write about too. You know, we're trying to uncover stories that need to be told about people who might not be talked about all that often. But then if a roller rink is closing in your neighborhood, write about it. People love that. If there are private dinners on yachts in Alameda, write about that too, because it's not always about doom and gloom. And I think just what's been this job gives back, I think, in a way, like those long nights. You get to see your work at the end of the day. I haven't done anything else in another industry, but I can imagine that not pushing papers, I shouldn't say bad about things about other industries, but like you can see what you're doing every single day. You're like, even if you didn't publish a daily or anything, you got those interviews and you've talked to those people and you've written those paragraphs, or you've seen those stories go online and get shared and get the feedback, good and bad. You always will get emails. But I think centering what you want to get out of this as well as what everyone else wants is a good balance. It sounds really self-centered, but I think that it's just a perspective thing. To the point about problematic stories, and when it's like, oh, I don't know if I jive with that, or it really kind of challenges me, I think putting myself in a reader's shoes is often something that's helpful. Like, what would I want to know out of this? So it's simultaneously really tapping yourself into it personally, but then also like removing yourself entirely. So this is, I don't know if this is just the opposite. I'm like kind of contradicting myself, but I think it's challenging, it's hard, it's also really rewarding, and it's also just fun. So I don't think we have real jobs sometimes. But then also we have 17 jobs at once. So
Great, thank you. Joelle?
I would say, if you're interested in journalism, there's a place for you here, for you to be able to, get your feet wet and do, the work that we've been talking about. Especially in this community, I feel like, personally for me, I'd like to see more Black and brown faces in journalism. People that look like me in journalism in those spaces. So I know that that's our community here. So there's plenty of opportunity in that aspect. I would, in terms of how to balance this work, I'm still kind of figuring that out myself, and I haven't been necessarily covering this particular beat for super long. I would say, the last 2 years, especially. And I'm still trying to figure out ways that I can balance out the secondhand trauma that you oftentimes will come across when you cover certain things. You don't realize that, as just a consumer of media, you don't realize oftentimes that these are, people with lives and families, and there's a lot of just impact that happens on, during these stories that we cover. So it's a very complicated thing. I think everybody has their own way of doing it, but I think having a sense of yourself and having an outlet, in whether it be your family or somebody you can talk to on a regular basis, I think that also helps in terms of how to deal with the things that we do and balance our lives. When I'm not doing journalism, I'm painting. I'm out with my family. I'm doing stuff that granted, I'm always kind of somewhat plugged into what's kind of going on, because I think that in this field we somewhat are, unless we're taking a complete vacation, I think we're always somewhat tapped into what's going on. But finding those things and those hobbies outside of the work is what I think gives us a little bit more balance and keeps us kind of centered in ourselves and in our humanity, I guess. I think that there's plenty of opportunity for you guys that are interested in journalism to get started here, and this is one of those places that I'll always have a special place for, because it's a place that's filled with stories. Your classmates have stories that they can tell. I've had classes with that had nothing to do with journalism here at Contra Costa College, and I was able to get a lead on a story that was happening. Just being able to talk to your classmates about their lives is enough of a motivation, I think, for you to be able to kind of practice this particular field and this thing we call journalism.
Great, thank you. David?
I think it's important, no matter what you do in this life, to have work-life balance. For myself, a bit of advice that was given to me was, to set set limits for myself. If you're driving home from school, pick a landmark. Once you pass, let's say Cutting Boulevard, or if you're heading north, Pinole Valley Road, if you're heading home, you're done with school for the day, right? That's your marker. For me, I'm off work. For a while, I was picking a tree on Grand Avenue in Oakland where I lived. I used to walk to work because we had a newsroom on Grand, past the tree and done with work for the day. So respect your colleagues' time. Now that I'm an editor and in charge of people, I will schedule messages, I'll schedule emails to be sent within the hours that they're working, just not to, I've resisted this, in the news business, there's always the temptation, just no matter what time of day it is, if something's happened, to notify somebody. I've tried to scale that back. Just be respectful of people's time when they're home doing whatever they're doing, whatever they want to do, they're not working. I think that's important. I think we can all do better at staying away from our devices while we're not needing them, or use them for fun. But scheduling messages, email, we use Slack internally as a messaging system at the newspaper. I think it goes a long way, and it's just fosters kind of a good work environment. I will say in closing, I don't have any, big grand thoughts or advice, but I live locally. I've worked for newspapers here in the Bay Area for a while. Pretty accessible. If you guys ever have any questions, want to chat about something, want to talk about a career in journalism, hit me up. You can find me online. If you want my email later, I'm happy to share my email with you all. This college gave me a lot, and I owe it some. So don't be a stranger.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. We have some time now for you all to ask some questions. I know we have some folks online as well. I'm going to ask Ms. Mariah to help me out with that piece, but does anyone in the room have any questions for any of our panelists?
So we're being asked questions.
I'll email you later. We're all on Twitter too, I think, by the way. Are you all on Twitter?
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
I deactivated my.
Oh yeah, you were like, peace, I'm out of
Nice.
Twitter. Yep.
So there. I was just talking about this with an editor the other day. I don't know if this is like too catchphrasy, but we've been kind of chatting about the idea of, with the internet and with, the ability to tweet out something or blog or all these different avenues of ways to consume news. Some of us are kind of chatting about what used to be the paper of record into the paper of interest. I think that's still something we're trying to see how that actually exists. But maybe instead of, writing every brief about a community meeting or Jimmy sold his goat down the street, I don't know what journalism used to be, but it's more like, how can we help people as opposed to just trying to make sure that everything that's ever happened gets into print. Goodness knows we don't have the space anymore for it. But I think that's something I've noticed, is kind of trying to, how can we help people not only learn about what's going on, but like beyond that, why is this happening because of something else? I think that's something I've noticed in my short career so far.
My career is even shorter than hers. So
Really?
I started in 2018 with my.
Oh, we're the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I think though, like, there's been a lot of conversation about like really hyper localized news. At least since I've been partaking in, the industry and the field and whatnot. So I feel like there's a lot of room and a lot of space for journalists and up and coming journalists to get into their community and be able to tell stories that these other outlets that are a lot bigger might not have the capability to tell. That's just one thing, I guess, that's impacted me in terms of how I think I've seen the conversation shift towards in the last couple of years. But prior to that, I don't really have any knowledge to like prior to 2018, like how things were, because I know that there, before there was a whole different way of doing things in terms of print and how that, because everything's digital now. So for the most part.
I'm not old enough to have worked in the newsroom when they used to have to paste up the newspaper. Like, I'm talking like they would use glue and they would glue on the headlines. It was a really messy job that looked awful to be a part of. But I've been around long enough to see some things change. To Joel's point, there is now kind of a comeback of local news outlets. We're seeing like Richmond Pulse is here in West County, telling stories that the East Bay Times is not telling. Berkeley side in Berkeley, the Oakland side in Oakland, where I worked for a year. These are community-based online news outlets. So for the most part, they're all online, largely told by reporters and editors, or stories told by local reporters and editors who know the community. That's something in my time that I've seen while we've scaled back coverage of certain cities. And in particular, we've scaled back in Contra Costa County in the number of reporters we have dedicated to covering West County, East County, Central County here. We've also we used to have more of a mixture of reporters who had a fresh perspective because they're not from the Bay Area. We used to have a bunch of New Yorkers. They're the loudest corner of the newsroom, right? But we had local reporters who knew the community. They were tied into the community. Their grandma, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins all lived here. They would know things that the New Yorkers might not know, right? Because they're new to the neighborhood. We've been lacking that healthy mix, I think, at least in our newsroom as of late. But filling some of that void is some of these local outlets, and they're expanding. I think Berkeley side and Oakland side are looking at expanding to West Contra Costa, which would bring another publication here, to right alongside the East Bay Times and the Chronicle, and the Richmond Pulse. So there is kind of a resurgence, I think, of hyper local news coverage. And from my experience, I think people seem to really like that. They want to know what's going on in the neighborhood. They want to know what events are happening. They want to know why they heard a loud crash or a bang down the street, right, at 2 a.m. So that's making a comeback. And I think those are some of the changes. There's been a lot of changes over the years, but I think that's the few I'd hit on.
Do you see the brick and mortar newsroom existing through your careers? I mean, I know we can't predict the future, but I remember, with the insurgence of social media and Twitter and blogs and everything, there was that fear like that all of you were going to be, if you didn't quickly get on that board, you were going to be unemployed, and you're not. So I'm just curious what your sense is of that.
I mean, I've already been laid off. It was my first job. I got laid off. So it was like, welcome to the industry, but in a good way. I don't want to scare you. But like, I don't know. I hope so. Like, there's just so much that you get from, and like, I've been in so many different iterations of a newsroom. You have a tiny little nonprofit where there's 3 of you scrapping together whatever you can. There's places that you have a lot of people, but they're just really distant. So I think what the newsroom, I mean, you were talking about it way before, of just like being able to bounce ideas off of each other, and like the physical, even if it's not physically next to each other in newsrooms anymore. I hope it stays the same, or I hope it like has some pocket to exist. I don't know if the money is there, but subscribe to your local paper, please. I don't know.
When I got to Houston in summer of 2021, like they were in the middle of not having anybody in the newsroom. So there was maybe I would say maybe 10 of us in the building, and I was one of them that were actually coming to the building. And it was cool to see over the next few months, the amount of people start showing more and more up. at the newsroom. But then coming back over here, things are still kind of somewhat remote, and at least in terms of what the Chronicle is doing right now. I feel like most of the people that are on this side of the bridge are probably going to be remote, so they don't have to go into the city, and there's that whole thing. But I think that having a newsroom really does, like, I don't know, if it just, the iron sharpened iron kind of thing, where we're all able to kind of glean off of each other and kind of get a little bit of motivation from one another, and have, you have other people working on stuff, and it gets you to want to push yourself a little bit harder. I think that that's always that has always been, I guess, my enjoyment of having a newsroom to go to, because it just gives you that, like, center of, this is like, the command center kind of thing. But I'm not sure, like, with the whole remote learning, with remote work and stuff like that, with Zoom being at our disposal, people might want to cut costs and not have a physical space. So, it might be up in the air in the next few years, how, I guess, this transition out of the pandemic, how, the bigger publications and the bigger corporations that push, newspapers, how they deal with, I guess, what our field is going to be going through.
I guess I'll just add too that I think we will see some cutbacks in the number of print editions that are produced by newspapers over time. Maybe a Monday goes away. There will always be online news. I think that will continue. Brick and mortar. We used to have, the Contra Costa Times had a newsroom up near the YMCA up the hill here a long time ago. That was gone. We moved South Marina over, by the waterfront there, by the Rosie River Museum. That's been shut down for a couple of years now. Fun fact, the Advocate Student Newsroom is actually larger than the newsroom that we now have for the East Bay Times reporters here in the East Bay.
I miss that newsroom.
So
Let us know if you want to lease
I don't
some
think
space.
well,
We might have to talk about this.
maybe like we can talk about that later, but it's that's not going away. Hopefully, that's a good space for for students to work. And yeah, we're all remote now. I mean, a lot of us. I mean, it's not just in journalism, right? It's kind of where things have gone. And if you don't own a building and it's between renting or laying people off, you're probably not going to rent. So something that the industry is dealing with right now. And I guess time will tell kind of what happens.
Thank you all so much. I don't have any other questions. All right, well, I would love, Randy.
Yeah, just one, maybe not a quick question, and relatively broad. I'm curious to see where y'all might go with this. It's been touched on a little bit, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts on, I guess, like social media in journalism? Have a place, not have a place, good, bad. Just what it, last, like,
Go ahead.
I feel like it's one of those, I guess, those tools that we have in our job. And it kind of gives everybody the chance to kind of somewhat practice journalism if they really want to, taking your phone out and filming something that's going on in your neighborhood, police activity, or, a big fire, that's nearby. That's something that's essentially just practical journalism for you to let your, people know that something's going on. I think that there'll always be a place, and I feel like there's going to be, no matter what, if Twitter goes down, there's going to be something else that's going to replace it. The same way we saw, Facebook rise and fall, and TikTok and it's emerging and stuff like that. There's always going to be one of these outlets that are going to take the majority of eyes, and it's going to be the platform for people to kind of share things on. And I think that at the end of the day, is pretty much like basic journalism.
I think what's interesting too is I kind of use, like, it's Twitter especially, but Instagram, TikTok as half yellow pages to reach people, like either get what they're tweeting about or messaging, or like physically getting in touch with someone. The power of being able to just send a DM and, like, fingers crossed. It's the same thing about calling someone. So I think that's been really nice. But I think you kind of a double-edged sword that I've noticed is when you try to find stories on those kinds of sites, I think it's useful to know what's going on in those spheres, but it's hard to sometimes remember that those are very small circles, and you're not going to find your stories on Twitter, on Facebook, or whatever. You might find a few here and there. So I think it's another tool, like you said, but not letting social media dictate what you're doing, but help you achieve what you're trying to do.
Yeah, good tool. You can find sources on there. There's tons of information. We're somewhat forced at the mercy of these sites now, because cities and police departments are releasing their information out through social media, which is unfortunate. Twitter is a vile site. I was spending way too much time on it, so I've deactivated my account and decided to kind of get back to my roots and spend more time talking with people and thinking and reading, and not refreshing Twitter every 15 minutes. So I've taken a break, but we'll see if I return.
Yeah, mental health on there has got to be prioritized.
I find myself like typing replies and then just like deleting it. I'm like, I don't need to reply to this. It's not worth it.
Goodness, and like any feedback you get from a story
I'm
that's
just-
in
I'm
the
just
paper, and you get emails, like you'll always get an email from someone, but like the replies, if you tweet anything and you like Twitter, I swear. So it's a dangerous game.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you all so much again for taking time out of your schedules that are relatively unpredictable. So you dedicated time today to be here, knowing that your day could be completely wild before and after you walk out of this room. So we thank you for that. I also want to introduce Professor Shaka, who's on the other side of the room and teaches our journalism classes here at CCC and helps to the students run the Advocate. Oops, there we go. And so in participating in the Advocate, it's those two classes there. Yes, the Journalism 122 and the News Practice Lab. So, you know, you don't have to be a journalism major to have an opportunity to collaborate and work for the Advocate. Yeah, you had a question. I'm sorry I said that and I didn't elaborate on what I meant. Brick and mortar, I meant like a building. So that just that's a term to refer to like a building versus something being virtual or not having a physical place to be. Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Hey, let's give it up for our panelists.
Go answer our editors.
Yeah, no, I gotta get on Slack right now.
Just one more announcement actually before everyone gets up. To our career center.
Hi, thank you so much. Before we finish up with the event, I also want to introduce myself. My name is Catherine Fonseca. Thank you to the panelists. I work in the Career Center. One of the things that I heard about the panelists that they talked about was making sure that you make connections, networking, right? And I also heard someone to make sure that you are exploring that career, that you're up for those 12-hour days. So I want to plug in the Career Center because that's one of the things that we can provide you assistance with. We offer internships. We offer help with developing a resume, preparing for an interview. We'll be hosting a career fair next semester. We also have a lot of jobs and internship opportunities on our Handshake Handshake portal. So make sure that you connect with us because we also bring different activities to you as well. So we have been running numerous events throughout the semester, but we'll be hosting on November 30th. We have a guest speaker who will be coming to you here in Fireside Hall, and he will be talking about how my identity is my superpower. How can you utilize your identity and connect your personal culture, your story, and to use that as an advantage when you go and apply for jobs. And then we also have a couple other workshops that we will be hosting in December. There's more information in your folders. So if you did not get a folder, make sure that you get one before you leave. And like I said, my name is Catherine Fonseca. I'm one of the 2 coordinators in the center. And hopefully we'll see you in the next few weeks. All right. Want to do this?
And then also, I just wanted to make sure all of you guys keep an eye on your email after this. I'm going to send out an email, of course, thanking you for being here, making sure you know where you can see the video later if you want to take a look at it when it's available online. And then also asking you to complete a very brief survey that just allows us to continue to improve our services and make sure that these events are helpful and meaningful for you. We really appreciate and value feedback. So the first 20 people that complete a survey will get their first option of gifts that you see here. So you'll see that there's a t-shirt, there's a mug, and there's a bag. So you would just have your guaranteed first choice. But everyone who completes the survey will actually get an item. So even if you're not, if you're the 25th person, you're still going to get an item. It just might not be first choice item. And then also wanted to make sure you know the hours and location of our career services. Catherine was introduced herself, and as she mentioned, they're there to really support you and helping figure out your pathway and prepare for your next steps as well. And then just really wanted to thank the panelists and our facilitator, amazing facilitator, Sarah again, and the faculty of the journalism department for helping us put this together. And we hope to see you again in spring. February will be our next Workforce Wednesday event. That'll be on our automotive program. So we hope to see you there. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're about to see.
I upset the agenda.